This week we are reviewing the Six of Crows duology. I am very excited about this one. This was a really great duology to read. I really enjoyed it. One of my favorite reads so far this year. Obviously we're not too far in the year. If you're looking for a recommendation, this could be it. Let's review these beautiful books. I wanted to do them both at the same time because they're duology and I don't see the point of separating them because I'm one of those people where it's like, if you liked the whole thing, I want to know about the whole thing, not just part of it. Anyway, green flags for these books. If you really like being put on an emotional roller coaster, this is for you. If you really like morally gray, this is for you, especially that one. If you really like morally gray, these are definitely for you. Literally every single character is somehow morally gray. Really enjoyed that, like the females and the males. So that was enjoyable. Something that is a little bit iffy with this book for me is it is considered YA, and so the ages of the main characters in this book range from like 15 to 18. Some of the stuff they are doing in this book just does not seem realistic, and some of the things that they have gone through, like it wasn't even like a maturity thing. It was like, okay, how have you lived so much life already and you're only like 15? It just didn't really make sense. I guess it was like there's so much that has happened to them that it was like, Another red flag for me anyway. This is something that I really don't like in books. I thought it was pretty well done for the most part, except for in this one. There is like going back and forth between present and past a fair bit. Just to kind of give you like more of their backstories, which is important in some aspects. However, it was a bit much. Like, I don't really like that ever in general, and I felt like when you got to this book, the second book is longer, and it just felt like it didn't need to be. So that's usually why I don't like seeing that in books, is because I find it takes you not only out of the reading experience that you're having, but like I find it rarely adds to what you're reading. It also just makes the books longer for like no reason. So obviously there are some interesting reasons to read this, as far as like if you like morally gray, if you like being on an emotional roller coaster, especially if you like some like shocking twists or turns. I think that's really interesting about these books. The only things that put me off, like I said, was some of the YA aspects. It's like sometimes they would be full-on teenagers, and then other times it's like there's just no way. Like, it just did not make any sense. So, I mean, I just aged them up in my head and it was fine. I've heard that a lot of people do this with these books. And honestly, I think the other thing that's really, really hard about this being YA in that sense, and that they're teenagers, is the things they are going through are like, I don't know, it just seems wrong that they would be considered like young adult teenage things. That just doesn't make sense to me. That was a little bit weird, but that's not a deal breaker in my opinion. Whereas like if I would have been told how much going back and forth between the past and present there was, I might not have read it. I mean, I'm glad I did, and it worked really well in this book, but that is something to keep in mind if you really, really don't like that. That's in these books. So there is a reading order to this series. You don't necessarily have to, or not the series, but this like multiverse, if you will. It's called the Grishaverse. So there are other books that are not necessarily part of this duology, but they are part of the universe and the world that these characters exist in. If you wanted to, you could read the Shadow and Bone trilogy first. That is the correct order to read it. I did read that series. And after reading this series, no, I don't think you have to read it before reading this series. And honestly, this series is better. However, something to keep in mind is that the Shadow and Bone trilogy that comes before this definitely explains certain things more thoroughly, like the magic system, than this series does. It's kind of assuming that you already know and understand it from those books. It's not like detrimental. If you don't know or don't read, you can definitely like move along just fine in these books without knowing. But there are things and people that kind of come up a little bit in between, and like a bit of a history that you gain from reading the Shadow and Bone trilogy first. And then after this, you have the King of Scars. It's kind of up to you if you want like a better, more complete understanding of everything that's happening going into Six of Crows. Then I think the Shadow and Bone trilogy is great. Another reason to read all of them, all 5 of them, would be that there is a TV show. It did get canceled. However, it does cover the events of like the first 3 Shadow and Bone books, and it does show you and give you like mental images of these places, these characters, this world. So that actually, in my opinion, that is one of the most fun things about books, is when they have like a film or TV adaptation. You can go in and compare them, which I actually thought was really fun to do with the Shadow and Bone trilogy and the TV show. But the Six of Crows duology is actually tied into it too. So it is really interesting to see the characters and places come to life. I really enjoyed that, and I probably would rewatch it now just because I've read this now too. That's really fun. And then basically this book is set in a place called Ketterdam, and Ketterdam, a bustling hub of international trade where anything can be had for the right price. And no one knows that better than criminal prodigy Kaz Brecker. Kaz is offered a chance at a deadly heist that could make him rich beyond his wildest dreams, but he can't pull it off alone. A convict with a thirst for revenge, a sharpshooter who can't walk away from a wager, a runaway with a privileged past, a spy known as the Wraith, a heartrender using her magic to survive the slums, a thief with a gift for unlikely escapes. Kaz's crew are the only ones who might stand between the world and destruction if they don't kill each other first. Those are obviously all the crows. This book is so well done in my opinion, as far as like the world itself, the characters. I really enjoy the characters. You can easily identify who's who. They all have their own unique personalities, and they are just really fun to be with. I really enjoyed the banter between these characters. Sometimes I feel like you don't get that in books, and their conversations and dialogue was honestly pretty close to perfect. Very enjoyable, especially for YA. The world itself was really cool too, very unique. In my opinion anyway. I haven't read anything quite like this world. However, I will say watching the Shadow and Bone trilogy, it really did help bring to life what this world would actually look like, because I did have a little bit of trouble picturing it. But yeah, I think overall the characters were amazing and the plot was quite interesting. Yes, in some aspects it was a little bit predictable in this book. However, she basically tore me apart in this book, so that was really fun. This book is obviously the sequel to the first. A war will be waged on the city's dark and twisting streets, a battle for revenge and redemption that will decide the fate of the Grisha world. So this is like, I don't want to spoil anything, that's why I'm only giving that part of the synopsis, but this book gets even more larger scale than the first one, but this one leads you really well into this book, in my opinion. Like I said, characters in both books are amazing. Basically had my heart ripped out in the second book, so that was really fun. If you really like books that do that, would highly recommend that. The endings for both were quite satisfying. I like that this one didn't necessarily come to like a perfect wrapped up ending, and it makes you want to keep reading. It gives you a reason to keep reading. But I found it very good and I would highly recommend both books. As far as what I put on like my book bucket list from these ones, I had kind of wrote something more about love and what I would enjoy seeing from a partner that I learned from Inej's dad. And then I also wrote something in terms of like becoming better with physical touch that I also learned from these characters in these books. But yeah, I think these are really, really great, and if you like adventure, you like morally gray, like I said, if you like just having a fun, imaginative time, and something that kind of just makes you feel like you're constantly on your toes, I would say these are really good books for that. I think they're really fun. They definitely are like, I think the argument constantly is that because it's YA and because they're kids, they couldn't be able, or they wouldn't have the ability to do the things they're doing. I'm not saying that. I think it's a book. I think we give adults more benefit of the doubt than we maybe should sometimes as far as stuff like this. And I just think just because they're kids doesn't mean they can't do these things. It's just sometimes like the amount of backstory for these characters and the things you learn about them, it's like how has all of that happened in less than 18 years? Like, it just seems like the time doesn't fit. So that's kind of why I aged them up in my head a little bit. But yeah, this is an amazing series. I really enjoyed it, and I think you would too. And I have nothing else to say besides that. So if you think you're gonna read it, let me know, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. I love talking about these books with you guys. If you have read it, definitely let me know what you thought, what your opinions are. If you disagree, agree, I would love to know what you think. And happy reading. I hope you enjoy this if you decide to pick it up.